Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Lately I've been getting quite a few questions about what actual colors are on my palette, so I decided to start sharing what paints I use in more detail. I decided to start with a video about the color I used to stay away from, and I'll tell you why in a second, the color green. I used to be terrified of using it in my paintings, despite the fact that it has always been my favorite color in life. But now I can't imagine my art practice without lots and lots of green in it. The reason I used to shy away from painting with greens is that when I was learning watercolor, I kept reading that green paint, especially the convenience mixes, which are the colors that have multiple pigments in them, could look icky or unnatural in a watercolor landscape. The advice was always to mix your own greens from blues and yellows if you want them to look organic. And while that's absolutely great advice for realist landscape painters, I do not consider myself to be one. My style has developed into a more expressive, playful, and interpretive one. And I'm not chasing a realistic look in my work. Eventually, I started slowly adding greens to my palette, and now they've become some of my most used colors. So on my palette right now, I keep a mix of warm and cool, granulating and non-granulating, single pigment and multi-pigment greens. And this variety gives me endless options for creating texture, depth and mood in my paintings. It also gives me the freedom to mix whatever green I want. Keep in mind that different watercolor manufacturers often use different pigments and recipes for the same color name. So let's say olive green, or Perylene green, or green gold can look slightly different from across different brands. That's another reason to be aware of what exact pigments are in the paint tubes that you add to your collection. And you can find the pigments on the actual tubes or online on the manufacturer's website. So one good example is green gold. So my green gold is by Michael Harding, and this green gold is by Daniel Smith. So if you compare the swatches, these colors are completely different, but Daniel Smith's rich green gold, I think, is made from the same pigment, from as far as I remember, as green gold by Michael Harding. So keep it in mind. So if you see my green gold and then you pick up green gold by Daniel Smith, this one looks a bit greener and less yellow than the one I have. I also find that the color swatches that you see on the websites, like Daniel Smith websites, any brand website, they're not actually very accurate. Also, every screen is different. So it is always best to see the colors in real life if possible. So a lot of the art stores actually have swatches on display. So if you can get yourself to an art store and have a look at those, that's great. If not, actually notice that YouTube videos, so the actual videos and not pictures, that compare different colors are a better way to check how a paint color would look in real life. Okay, so let's go through all these colors one by one, and I'll start with green gold. I love this green. I've only had it for probably around a year, but it has become one of my most used colors. And it is transparent, it is luminous, it is very warm. It is a single pigment color, so it's very safe to use in mixes if you want to stay away from muddy colors. I use it for creating glowing washes because it's very transparent. It is also perfect for light, delicate greens like spring foliage. It is great to use in backlit landscapes when the sun is behind the subject. Also, it mixes beautifully with other colors to create vibrant greens. And sometimes when I use it on its own, it's actually way too strong because it could be like borderline fluorescent, especially when it's wet. So I often mix it with yellows or also olive green or Perylene green to calm it down a bit. So love this color. If you can get your hands on a tube of it, highly recommend. Next is olive green. This one is by Daniel Smith. It is one of my most used colors in general. Now, it has multiple pigments in it, so it is a convenience mix. Because it has multiple pigments, I try not to mix it with more than one other color because then it can actually get quite muddy. It is a soft and muted green, and it feels natural without being dull. It granulates beautifully because it has ultramarine blue in it, and I find that it's great for the midtones in foliage. So when I paint trees, I often use this green for the midtones, and then for the highlights I use yellows or green gold, or I mix in yellow more yellow or some green gold into olive green for the highlights. And then for the shadows, I would add some indigo or Perylene green. So it is a true convenience mix because it is a multi-pigment color. So technically I can mix a very similar color out of the colors already on my palette, because I already have French ultramarine blue, I have a warm yellow, and I have a raw amber. But having olive green already in the tube ready to go gives me consistent results without me having to fuss over the ratios of the yellow and blue and the brown to achieve the same color. Next one is Australian Green Leaf Dark by Art Spectrum. I do not really use it very often because, as you can see here on my palette, it actually crumbles when it dries and it doesn't re-wet really easily. So I need to remember to use it freshly squeezed, and I just keep forgetting because I love having my paints already sitting on my palette, and I re-wet them with a spritz of water before I start painting. If I try to pick it up with my brush and there are little clumps of paint on my brush, it can actually really spoil the wash. So I unfortunately do not paint with it very often, but it is a beautiful color. I love the brown undertones in it. When you look at gum trees, when you look at their crowns, you can see the brown color in them, and this color is perfect for painting masses of gum trees. Next one is Undersea Green by Daniel Smith. It is a fascinating mix because it splits into different tones. You can really see the granulation of ultramarine blue in it and the specks of ultramarine blue even in very light washes. It's really good for painting moody and atmospheric landscapes. Since it has multiple pigments in it again, it can get quite dull if I mix it with other colors. So I usually try to use it on its own. I love it for the shadows because it has these blue undertones in it. I can't say I'd use it often though, as I prefer more vibrant greens, but still it's a very soothing color to play with, so I really enjoy painting with it. Next one is Rare Green Earth by Daniel Smith. So this cool grayish green is a single pigment color. It's I believe it's an iron oxide. It granulates heavily. It is wonderful for creating texture. I used to play with it a bit more, but since it doesn't create a great range of values, so this is the darkest it can be, so it doesn't go very dark, and it doesn't re-wet as easily, I keep forgetting about it, but actually would love to introduce it into my work because it is just so subtle, so muted, very gentle, and it works so well for soft backgrounds. It works really well if you mix it with a bit of blue to paint, say, distant hills in a hazy, misty landscape. Next is Jadeite Genuine by Daniel Smith. This color is from the Primatech range, and I believe it's made from jade stone. I got it a few years ago because I heard other people mention how rich and deep it was, and it looks so good in their work, but I'm yet to learn how to use this color in my own landscapes. It has this black undertone, almost like a sediment, and I'm not a big fan of it in washes, but it's great for painting fir trees, for example, because if you look here, the texture is really suitable for painting evergreens. It is on the cooler side as well, and I've noticed that in my work I tend to use warmer greens, but I'm actually going to make an effort to get to know this color better, as it's just absolutely gorgeous. In this swatch, when I was painting this swatch yesterday, I was just admiring how deep the color is. And in mixes, I believe it would create really rich, nice and complex darks. Next we have Sap Green by Daniel Smith. This is the latest green I added to my palette. It is super vibrant thanks to phthalo green PG7 pigment in it, and it spreads very fast on wet paper, often even like it looks like it's fighting with other colors and pushing them out. And I find that phthalo pigments often behave this way, so I do not use them very often just because how potent they are, and they can be very overpowering. So this color I use it mostly in mixes, but you know, just swatching watching it already makes me calmer and happier because this color is just so joyful and so fun. It's vibrant and soothing at the same time. So I think when used on its own, it is great for painting fresh foliage, spring landscapes, lush green grass. But if you add yellows or blues to it, it will subdue it and create softer greens, especially if you use warmer yellows and warmer blues. Now, Perylene green. This color is a superstar of my palette. It doesn't look like one maybe, as it's not as vibrant and bright as many of the other greens I have, but this green together with olive green is my most used one for sure. It is a single pigment, semi-transparent, non-granulating color, which means clean mixes and less muddy tones. It has a huge tonal range, so as you can see here, it goes from almost black to a very, very pale color. And my favorite use for it is in mixes. So I add yellows or green gold to it to create lovely warm greens, or I add blues for really cool forest greens. I love it with indigo especially. I also love using it as what I call a mother color in a landscape. I mix every green in a scene by modifying Perylene with yellows for warmer greens or blues for cooler tones. And because this one color is present in all the greens in that landscape, the color scheme looks more cohesive and more harmonious. I actually have a video on my channel that demonstrates this approach, and I will link it in the description. And it also creates these wonderful whimsical textures if you splatter some water on a semi-dry Perylene wash. It has to be quite dark though. It also lifts quite easily. It's not too staining, which is great when you want to lift paint to fix some mistakes or to add some highlights. If I had to recommend just one green for your palette, this would be it. You can create any green by modifying Perylene green with yellows and blues. And it is also a fun one to mix with other colors like reds, oranges, purples, because you can achieve some very dreamy, very interesting, unexpected neutrals with it. So these are the greens currently on my palette, and as you can see, I still have these 3 wells sitting empty, so I'm actually considering adding more greens here soon. Not sure which ones yet, but I'm actually going to an art supply store tomorrow, so maybe I'll pick another green that will join my lineup of greens. So I'm recording this a few days later. I did go to an art supply store. In fact, I went to an afternoon with Michael Harding at Parker's Art Supplies down in Sydney. Michael Harding was in Sydney talking to artists about his oils and watercolor paints, and I had a chance to try some of his pigments. I picked up Sub Green after I tried it there. I already had Sub Green by Daniel Smith, but this Sub Green looks very different to Michael Harding's Sub Green. And this is another thing that I mean by paints of the same name, like Sub Green, looking completely different across different brands. So both of them have PG7, which is phthalo green blue shade, which is a cool green pigment. But Daniel Smith has quinacridone gold and nickel azo yellow, and Michael Harding's Sub Green has PBR6 in addition to PG7, and PBR6 is an iron oxide pigment, so it's a reddish brown, therefore it's much cooler because it doesn't have as much yellow in it as this one. I would like to swatch it with you and we'll see how different it looks to Sub Green by Daniel Smith. This is another color that can go from a very dark tone, almost black, especially when freshly squeezed, into a very light wash. So when it dries, it will look slightly less vibrant, but it will still look very nice and moody. So I'm quite glad that I added this color to my collection of greens. And if you place Daniel Smith's Sub Green next to Michael Harding's Sub Green, you can see a very clear difference between these two colors, despite the fact that they actually share a name. So I think Michael Harding's Sub Green is somewhere in between Jadeite and Perylene green. I would like to talk about the importance of understanding color theory when painting with greens. I think we all learned early in life that greens are created by mixing yellow and blue paint. But here is the trick. There are both warm and cool variants of every primary color, which are yellow, blue, and red. And if you look at the color wheel, which is a fantastic tool to have in your studio, red is a complementary color to green. And complementary colors cancel each other out. They become a neutral when you mix them in the same proportion. So that means that any red in your mix will mute the green. So if you want to mix vibrant greens, choose cool blues and cool yellows because they don't contain any red. So if you look at the color wheel, the cool yellow and the cool blue will mix a very vibrant green. But warm blues or warm yellows, on the other hand, they introduce red undertones because they're closer to red on the color wheel, and that neutralizes the green. And also, if you have a green that's too intense, like say sub-green, you can drop some red into it to calm it down a bit or to push it into the distance to create atmospheric depth in a landscape. I think that this is such a fun way to see color theory in action, and also it helps you understand why some greens pop while others feel subdued. So these are all my greens, and I would love to know what your favorite greens are, so feel free to share them in the comments. Thanks for watching and happy painting!